The beekeeper approaches the skep with a clay pot trailing smoke. Burning cow dung. Smells terrible, works beautifully. The smoke calms the bees just enough for him to reach inside. The skep itself is a dome of woven straw plastered with mud and dung on the outside for insulation. In other parts of Europe, they used hollowed logs or clay cylinders. But the principle was always the same. Give the bees a home, take their honey. He pulls out chunks of honeycomb, heavy and dripping. This isn't the clean, golden honey you'd buy in a jar. It's raw, full of wax, pollen, maybe a few drowned bees. That's normal. That's what medieval honey looked like. The comb goes into a wooden bucket. Back at the house, it'll need cleaning before anyone can make mead from it. Now the preparation begins. A woman scrapes the comb into a large ceramic crock, breaking it apart with her hands. She's looking for the darkest chunks of wax and debris to pull out. The honey itself is thick, uneven in color. Spring honey runs pale. Late summer honey from heather or buckwheat comes out dark, almost like molasses. Water comes from the well. In some households, they'd boil it first over the hearth. Kills anything living in it. But boiling takes fuel and time, so plenty of mead makers skip this step entirely. They trust the honey and the alcohol to handle any problems later. The water goes into an iron cauldron hanging over the fire. Not boiling, just warm. Warm enough to dissolve the honey easily. Now she adds the honey. Stirs it with a long wooden paddle. The ratio matters here. More honey means stronger mead, sweeter, higher in alcohol. Less honey makes a lighter drink, what they'd call small mead. Something for every day, not feasts. She keeps stirring until the honey disappears into the water completely. This mixture is called the must. The must sits overnight. Heavier particles, bits of wax, debris from the comb, all of it slowly sinks to the bottom. In the morning, she ladles the clearer liquid off the top into a fresh vessel. Some makers strain it through linen cloth for extra clarity. Most don't bother. Now comes the question of flavor. Plain mead is fine. But across medieval Europe, people added things. Lots of things. In Wales, they made metheglin, healing mead. The name literally means medicinal liquor. Herbs boiled in water first. Mint, rosemary, thyme, fennel, angelica, wild herbs gathered from fields and forests. The strained herb water gets mixed with the honey. The belief was medicinal. The result was complex and aromatic. Different regions had their own traditions. English households might add pepper and cloves. Scandinavian makers sometimes used juniper. Monasteries experimented with whatever grew in their gardens. Wealthier households had access to imported spices, ginger from the east, cloves from distant islands, cinnamon that had traveled thousands of miles. Expensive, but they transformed the flavor into something warm and layered. She drops a few cinnamon sticks and a handful of cloves into the must, stirs them in. They'll steep during fermentation, slowly releasing their flavors. Here's the part medieval mead makers couldn't explain. They knew it happened. They just didn't know why. Fermentation needs yeast, but yeast won't be isolated and understood for centuries. Right now, it's basically magic. Wild yeast floats in the air. It lives on fruit skins, in the cracks of wooden vessels, on the honeycomb itself. Leave sweetened water sitting long enough and something will find it. But waiting for wild yeast is unpredictable. So most mead makers borrow from the ale brewers. This foam skimmed off the top of fermenting ale is called barm. It's alive with yeast. A few spoonfuls stirred into the must, and fermentation will start within hours instead of days. In Scandinavia, they had another trick. Wooden sticks dipped into fermenting liquid, then hung up to dry. The dried yeast could survive for weeks. Drop the stick into fresh must and it wakes right back up. She stirs the barm into the must. Covers the vessel with a loose cloth tied at the rim. Not airtight. The cloth keeps out insects and debris but lets gases escape. Now she waits. Within a day, the surface starts to foam. Small bubbles at first, then larger ones. The yeast is eating sugar and producing alcohol. Also carbon dioxide, which is what makes all those bubbles. The smell changes too. Sweet gives way to something yeasty, almost bread-like. Walk into the room and you know immediately that fermentation is happening. Temperature matters, though nobody has a thermometer. Warm conditions speed things up but can produce harsh flavors or invite spoilage. Cooler conditions slow the process but usually taste cleaner. Too cold and the yeast goes dormant entirely. The solution is placement. During summer, fermentation vessels go down into the cellar where it's naturally cool. During winter, they stay near the hearth to keep the yeast active. Some makers wrap their vessels in straw or cloth for insulation. She checks the mead every day, watching the bubbles, tasting occasionally. When it stops tasting sweet and the bubbling slows down, primary fermentation is ending. This takes anywhere from a week to a month, depending on temperature and how much honey she used. The mead is cloudy now, full of dead yeast cells, protein fragments, fine particles suspended throughout. Drinkable but not ideal. Time to rack it. She carefully ladles the clearer mead from the top into a fresh vessel, leaving the thick sediment at the bottom behind. This sediment is called lees. Leaving mead on its lees too long creates off flavors as the dead yeast breaks down. The mead goes into a wooden barrel for aging. Oak is common in England and France, pine or fir in Scandinavia. The wood itself adds subtle flavors over time, vanilla and tannin notes seeping in from the staves. The porous wood also allows tiny amounts of air exchange, which can mellow harsh edges. This is where patience comes in. A few weeks of aging smooths out the rough spots. A few months develops real complexity. The spices integrate, the honey character deepens. But medieval barrels aren't airtight. Leave mead too long and bacteria will find their way in. The alcohol starts converting to vinegar. What was becoming excellent mead turns into something fit only for salad dressing. Spoilage is always a risk. Souring, mold on the surface, strange flavors from wild yeast contamination. She fights back with what she has, scalding barrels with boiling water before use, keeping vessels full to minimize air contact, storing everything in the coolest part of the cellar. Some batches turn out perfect. Others sour within weeks. Consistency isn't really possible yet. Every batch is a small gamble. When the mead tastes right, balance between sweetness and alcohol, with the spices integrated and no off flavors, it's ready. She draws it from the barrel into a ceramic jug, pours it into wooden cups and drinking horns. In great halls, mead like this appeared at feasts. In farmhouses, a simpler version served as everyday refreshment. Monasteries produced it alongside the beeswax candles their hives also provided. The color in the cup depends on the honey. Pale gold from spring clover, deep amber from late summer heather. The clarity depends on how carefully she racked it and how long it aged. She tastes it one last time. The honey comes through first, floral and rich. Then the warmth of the spices. A clean finish with no sourness, no vinegar tang, no strange off flavors. This batch worked. The barrel goes back to the cellar, stored in the coolest corner for the next occasion. A wedding, a harvest celebration, a visit from important guests, a cold winter night when something warm and alcoholic sounds perfect. The whole process, from smoke drifting through the bee yard to mead poured into cups, has taken months. Every step done by hand, guided by experience passed down through generations. Knowledge shared between neighbors, between monasteries, between mothers and daughters. No thermometers, no sterile equipment, no controlled yeast strains, no way to measure alcohol content or sugar levels. Just honey, water, fire, time, and the knowledge of what worked before.